This is the Open University.
So it's been a while. It's Asia again after 5 years of being stuck in Europe. I mean, very pleasantly stuck in Europe. And 2018 was the last time I was in Japan, Korea. I was also in Malaysia, Myanmar, Vietnam that year. But since then I haven't been here, and I was wondering what it would be like to come back. Would there be a sense of nostalgia? It's not quite long enough for that. Would there be a sense that things have changed? Here in Seoul, where I'm spending a month, there is that sense. It's a very fast-changing city. And we arrived from Helsinki, where it was freezing, into a kind of grey Seoul initially, and Fashion Week was happening at the Dongdaemun Design Plaza, staying in a hotel near there, a very cheap hotel. And so a lot of people posing for photographs and projecting parallel worlds in the way you do when you wear kind of extraordinary fashions to, light up people's imaginations and make them think about what life might be like, or what normality might be like in a world in which everybody dressed that strangely. Even I was photographed. I just stood there and photographers ran up. I think there are these freelance photographers who just shoot whoever looks posy. Coming back to a city like Seoul after 5 years, I mean, this is a city I've never spent more than about a week in, maybe 2 weeks, and usually in the dead of winter when it's very cold here. Luckily they have underfloor heating, unlike the Japanese. But this is spring, and after the initial grey, slightly chilly weather, it got really warm. It got above 20, and actually this coming weekend it's going to be 27 degrees here. It's kind of increasing by 1 degree per day. So I've just been with Naomi, my partner, flaneuring around in the usual way. And what's interested me, first of all, is how things have changed and how districts have changed. Like Mulai district, which is where I played my only ever Seoul gig in 2011, the first year I came here. It was kind of a trendy warehouse district in a Bushwicky way back then, but it's even more that now. But Seongso was the area that really impressed me this time, especially on weekends. Seongso it's a funny little triangular district in between two rivers along at the east end of Seoul, and it really was vibrant in a kind of self-consciously trendy way. It's not yet become soap and candles. It's the fate of all kind of gentrified areas is to become soap and candles, and eventually to become so expensive that no shops can even afford to be on the streets. But at the moment, Seongso is kind of the most pulsatingly happening district. Seongsu, I should say, I think it is. And but it also interested me to go to the areas where I'd first been really impressed by the graphic design bookshops, the sort of art bookshops, like Book Society and Post Poetics, and they've both moved since I was last here. Book Society has moved to a basement just round the corner from where it used to be, but it was closed the day we went, although it said it was open on Google Maps. Google Maps is useless here, by the way. You have to download Naver, which is not in English, it's only in Korean, so it's a bit tricky getting around. Google was banned from using offshore data bases to use their maps, and they refused to do it with local Korean data, so they provide a very basic service. Post Poetics was in Itaewon, the sort of posh end of Itaewon, and now it's moved down the road from where it used to be, and where it used to be is a clothes shop, pop-up clothes shop now. And nobody was in there when we were there. The stock looked a bit shabby. So I don't know. Some areas remind me a lot, because I will be in Japan later, of course, having come to Asia. Some areas here in Seoul already remind me in the way that when I used to go to Rome by train from Scotland, I'd arrive in Paris and spend the first night in Paris and kind of feel I was in Rome already. Certain parts of Paris have that very Latin feeling. So certain parts of Seoul have a Tokyo-like feeling. Sinsadong reminds me of Harajuku in the 90s. That's the kind of the west end of Gangnam style. It's the style area of Gangneung. I've been meeting a few Westerners unexpectedly in some cases. Colin Marshall is based here, and he's a New Yorker writer who looks a bit like Wes Anderson and writes for the New Yorker, which is already kind of Wes Anderson. So he's a great fountain of knowledge. Ingo Neerman also ran into him unexpectedly yesterday, and he's at the Sonia Art Center with his wife, the curator Trus Martinez. They're opening a show there called Joy. It's like a group show with some Swiss connections. And Misaki Kawai and Justin Waldron are coming. Misaki, who does some Hetauma paintings and goods and ceramics, actually. She's doing a ceramics pop-up in Taiwan. So it's going to be fun to have all these people around. I was thinking about the Korean flag, preparing this little emission, thinking about how it contains the yin and the yang symbol. It doesn't contain the full symbol because it doesn't contain the little dot. So within the yin you have a little dot of yang, and within the yang you have a little dot of yin. And that seems like a great symbol for the kind of codependence, the relationship that Paris has to Seoul and Seoul has to Paris. Because Noemi and I, when we live in Paris, we live a kind of pseudo-Asian lifestyle, which is partly Japanese, although decreasingly Japanese, I would say. There are places like the Japan Center or the Rue Saint-Anne, the area around Opera, which are kind of Japanese, but it feels like a legacy and a mature legacy culture now in Paris, whereas the Korean and Taiwanese cultures, and Chinese to some extent, are still very strong and vital and kind of self-conscious. And so we go to a lot of, and Korean, so we go to a lot of Korean places like, there's a place called Plus 82, which is a kind of play on words because 82 in Korean is Paris, so it's Plus Paris. And also Plus 82 is the code you dial on your old telephone to get the Seoul numbers. So it's run by Koreans. And another place called Paris Dabang. There's various... Cot Cafe, which is it's a couple, he's French and she's Korean. So they gave us a lot of recommendations. We're quite friendly with them, and they suggested all the cafes that they knew that were interesting here in Seoul. But Seoul is a city of like 10,000 cafes, has so many. You could spend a whole lifetime going to a different one every day. We've already been to something like 20 just in the first week or so. But and they've been fantastic. I have to say they're very good cafes. But to go back to the yin yang thing, yes, it's sort of the idea of Paris in Seoul and Seoul in Paris, because you have this thing called lifestyle, which is aspirational and which is dreamy. The people, when they're doing quite well in their economies, I mean, the Seoul, the South Korean economy is doing a little less well than it was a couple of years ago. It was about 4% annual growth, I think, in 2020. It's gone down to about 2% post-COVID. But 70% of Seoul's economy depends on world trade. It's a very globally oriented kind of place. And it's obviously been locked down quite badly and is now reopened. And so recovering somewhat. But they also have a demographic time bomb in terms of having very rapidly aging population. Young people don't want to have children. They're holding off on having families, and so the fertility rate is declining very rapidly. But that means a lot of young people are just sort of having fun. I mean, maybe they're also staying at home. There's a very strong marked gap between the people who are poor, who are elderly, who have almost no money, no resources, and those who go to cram schools and go to the best universities and get the best jobs. So I think young people they work very hard, and the education system here is very good. There's very high levels of numeracy and literacy. So you get that sense of aspiration and of hard work to achieve things. Unfortunately, one of the things people achieve here is cars, and there are 8-lane and 6-lane highways all through the city, which is not great for walking through, and also terrible for air quality. Air quality is something I couldn't live with long term here. It's just poisonous on certain days. But I wanted to talk about what they call the Taeguk, which is their version of the yin-yang, which is based on the I Ching. So they actually have the I Ching, the Book of Changes, beloved of hippies in the 60s, and composers like Terry Riley, built into their flag. And it's a motif which denotes harmony between negative cosmic forces, which is the yin, the blue portion of the flag, and positive cosmic forces, which is the red portion of the flag, depicting the truth of nature, that all things are created and evolve through the interaction of yin and yang. And I found that really interesting because here in Seoul, for instance, there are a lot of brands the cafes that we go to in Paris are here as well. I say a lot. I mean, there's Boot Cafe, which is a funny little cordonnier in Le Marais. It's a tiny, tiny cafe which has room for only about 10 people who sit on brightly coloured stools. And they're usually Koreans, or they used to be in the days of free travel anyway, mostly Koreans at that cafe, because there are 2 branches in Seoul. There's only one in Paris. It's an original bootmaker with a symbol of a boot. But they've actually recreated the facades in 2 branches here in Seoul. So you go to Hyundai, and there is a branch of Boot Cafe which looks in a weird way more real than the Paris one, or more itself than the Paris one, and has room for more people to sit in there, and is more frequented. The Paris one's only open about 3 days a week, I think, or 4 days a week. So and there's also OFR, which is the bookshop in Paris that we've gone to, that has at various times had branches in London and Tokyo but closed them. They're a kind of touchy and eccentric old couple who run OFR in Paris. Here in Seoul, it's in a house near the palace. Hapjeong, I won't even try to pronounce what the palace is called. Hapjeongyong Palace. So on the west side of the palace grounds, there's a kind of trendy area which has various graphic design bookshops and cafes and things like the MK2 Cafe. And now OFR and Boot Cafe are also there. So these little, the spot of Parisian presence in Seoul, and the spot of the spot of their presence here, but also there's a chain called Paris Baguette, for instance, which is everywhere. Literally on every block is a branch of Paris Baguette, which is not, it doesn't have baguettes, and it's not from Paris. They have one branch in Paris just to kind of legitimize their Frenchness, the marketing angle of their Frenchness. But actually, the branch in Paris is selling totally different patisserie, and is kind of just an excuse. Nobody visiting it in Paris would know it was anything different from a regular Parisian patisserie. But it's actually just a kind of corporate ruse to make it look as if Paris Baguette, the Korean baker, is French, which it absolutely isn't. All they sell is this fluffy white bread stuff, which is frustrating. I always look for even real baguettes. I mean, I prefer German bread, frankly. So, this thing about lifestyle, I think about the aspirations of up-and-coming young Soulites to be Parisians. How much do they really aspire to that? If they really go to Paris, do they get the famous Paris shock, the culture shock, Paris syndrome, in which Japanese tourists in the 80s and 90s would actually have a kind of toxic shock when they realized how dangerous and dirty and in some ways disgusting or unhygienic Paris was compared with their Japanese standards. So there'd be this kind of disillusionment about the real state of Paris. I wonder if Soulites would get that going to Paris as well. Do we get a version of that coming here? Whatever, if something is proposed to you as lifestyle and as aspirational, you're setting yourself up for a fall, because lifestyle is a dream. And I'm really interested in how cultures dream other cultures as their ideals, and then interpolate and sort of integrate them into their own march forward. Because you have a long march towards some kind of lifestyle that you want, but you never quite reach it. Like the horizon, it's always just slipping out of reach, no matter how well your economy is doing. So weirdly enough, Seoul has become an aspirational target. We watch vlogs. We sit in Paris watching vlogs by Carrie Cakes and some other Seoul vloggers, including actual Korean Seoul vloggers with subtitles and things. I'm not learning that. I don't really speak a single word of Korean. Colin Marshall is obviously an expert, speaks many, many languages, and understands the culture from the inside. There are many, many kind of dreams and aspirations which are destroyed by knowledge, though. So I don't know if living here, he aspires to live here. It doesn't make any sense. I always think about Warhol coming to New York. There's a kind of sense that Warhol had a glamorous idea of Hollywood and of New York. He moved to New York and became an illustrator, commercial artist, and then found New York didn't really contain the glamour he imagined growing up in a smaller city it was going to have. And then he decided to create that glamour. So I think you have to say that the aspirational delusions people have are productive and can actually turn into something. So South Korea might become, in a sense, a new France or a new Paris in Seoul. You can have this, it can become a reality if you want it to, because it's aspiration and dreaming and lifestyle imaginings. The imaginings of a good time coming are actually productive and actually take you somewhere.
Open University.